Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Welcome to the Snooker Hall podcast. I'm Dan Murren, and today I'm joined by super snooker fan Rob Francis. Welcome to the Snooker Hall podcast, Rob.
Thank you very much. Yeah, really happy to be here. I love this podcast, so yeah, great to join the Snooker Hall community.
Thank you very much. So you're a big snooker fan. What can you tell us about your life, your snooker life?
My snooker life, huge snooker fan. I'd say probably been a snooker pushing about sort of 20 years now as a fan in the sort of its broadest sense. Obviously, sort of fandom, your levels fluctuate and change over time. And in my case, it's definitely sort of grown sort of exponentially over the years. Started watching sort of the early 2000s, mainly sort of the World Championship. I probably watched bits and pieces of other tournaments back then, but the World Championship sort of always sort of caught my attention. Sort of at the sort of the following decade, around sort of 2011, 2012, started watching even more, probably broadened my horizons towards sort of the other Triple Crowns. And around that sort of time, I became a huge fan of Neil Robertson. And following that, I'm glad the listeners won't be able to see that, but Dan just did a glorious fist pump of approval. So yeah, I'm in good company. But yeah, once I became a fan of Neil, then my fandom levels skyrocketed somewhat. And a few years later, I was going to tournaments on sort of quite a regular basis, and still am to this day. Yeah, to put it briefly, yeah, that's my snooker life.
So Neil Robertson, you've mentioned, is one of your favourite players. Who was the player that got you into snooker? Who was the first? What was the first time you ever saw the sport and thought, "Wow, that's cool"?
Well, the first time I ever remember watching it sort of in a proper capacity was 2003 World Championships. So Ken Doherty caught my eye during that tournament, and so I sort of followed his progress sort of there. And he was kind of, for the first few years, he was the player I sort of was supporting and sort of rooting for, because I thought he was a pretty cool character, basically. And generally around that time, he was kind of coming towards the end of, I say the end, like the end of his sort of his time at the top of the game, you would have to say. As he started, it wasn't too long before he started doing punditry and such. A couple of years later, I was watching the World Championship, and Sean Murphy, obviously 2005, yeah, he really did catch my eye in that tournament, because that was the first time I'd really seen someone sort of come through sort of out of nowhere. To a certain extent, I know he was known in the scene, but to sort of a more casual viewer at that time, yeah, it was really quite exciting to see someone making waves of that capacity. And yeah, I've been a sort of a pretty big fan of Sean ever since. I think he's a fantastic guy, and yeah, fantastic for the game, actually. It's interesting. I think it was his match against Judd in. This is going off on a bit of a tangent, but his match against Judd in Saudi recently, I saw a comment on one of the streams, and it said something like, it's along the lines of, Sean is not only a credit to the game, but he is a credit to mankind. And I thought, well, those are big words, but I like it. Yeah, I think Sean is a fantastic ambassador for the sport, and a little bit underrated in that regard, actually, as he does catch some flack here and there. But ever since he's been sort of in the scene in a big way, I think it's he has been very, very positive for it, basically, and I'm sure he will continue to be, sort of, even after he's sort of hung up his cue, as I can't imagine him sort of not being sort of a part of the snooker world in some form or another.
I agree. I'm a massive Sean Murphy fan. Again, like you, I think he's great for the game. It's so nice to see someone who clearly is passionate, but can match their passion with skill. It's just the little things he does, and I think people are noticing it a lot more when he hits the century. After that century ceiling ball goes in, it's that little nod he gives to the crowd. I compared it to
Appreciating the crowd, appreciating the fans. That's, you love to see it. Yeah, it's always
little gesture. It doesn't, you don't have to, do a full bow or anything like that. You just, little nod. Thank you. And
yeah,
there is, yeah, there's something I think quite likable about him. I say he does get some flack. He's not universally popular.
Hmm.
I don't see
Hmm.
why. I think he should be, but the man's record is incredible. He's won everything there is to win in the game.
Triple crown, won them all. Is it four world finals?
Yep.
He's won. He's got to be as close. I mean, if you don't class him as a great, I'm not sure everyone does. Some people probably do. He's got to be as pretty much as close as you can get without being in that club, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, I think with a lot of people, it's because he does stand out. He is different than most other players in terms of the way he articulates himself and his manner. And I think that can sometimes rub people up the wrong way a little bit because they see it as potentially pious or something along those lines. They prefer sort of a bit more rough and ready characters that are a bit more relatable to them, I suppose. But I think it's it does feel. I mean, everyone has their little blunders and such in life, and with Sean, it does sometimes feel that he gets more stick for his than another player would under similar circumstances. But I think like when Sean has lashed out or made a mistake or something, he always owns up to it and is very gentlemanly as he does so. And I think that should absolutely be applauded. And I know you brought this up on a previous episode, but people do love to. I mean, if you have to bring up a an incident from many years ago that doesn't really hold much relevance in the scene today, you're kind of clutching at straws in terms of trying to bring someone down a level. I think, of course, referring to the infamous Chalkgate
Okay. Yeah.
situation. It's like if you got dredge that stuff up, the man's probably having a pretty fine time right about now.
Yeah. I noticed that during the World Championship when he was playing Stephen Maguire,
Hmm.
Alan McManus was very keen to bring this up and
Hmm.
animosity between the two players. And I'm going to say
Yeah.
that both, okay, they're not BFFs, but they can be civil to each other. They shake hands before the match, after the match.
Hmm.
They want to beat each other, but they want to win every match they're in. And I
Hmm.
really thought I know you have to sell rivalries, you have to sell
Yeah.
tension, but I thought they were trying to make a mountain out of a molehill with that. It's in the past for the players, clearly. Sean has
Yeah.
moved on. He's wished Stephen well in the past. I thought it was something out of nothing.
Yeah, I'm a bit more forgiven about it with regards to punditry because they are there to do a job and to sell to a certain extent and all of that sort of thing. Um, so I am okay. I don't mind it being brought up and stuff. Obviously, because it did happen and it was a thing and it is somewhat notable. But I don't really think it's fair to use it as a means to sort of attack Sean in any capacity because it just seems like a very low hanging fruit basically. But I love rivalries and needle and stuff in snooker. And there isn't that much of it really. So I do think sometimes uh, those putting on the show or commentating or such will sometimes they'll want to cling on to what sort of scrapes of animosity there are, just to sort of build something up a little bit more. And it's not always necessary. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it isn't. But it's it was a very long time ago, wasn't it? Now, but it does, and it will happen again. Probably every time they play each other um, until the end of time, probably.
Yeah, it's just you mentioned low hanging fruit there. Speaking of low hanging fruit, do you play?
Oh well, I have played. Is that the? Is that the? There's no further questions. I assume no. Is that, no, that's it.
You
Yes.
play? Are you any good?
Sorry, you just broken up a little bit there. I didn't catch
Okay.
that. And I'm not just saying that because I didn't want to answer. That literally happened.
It's convenient, isn't it? Yeah. Are you good? Are you bad? Are
No,
you
okay. No, I have. I mean, I've only played 3 times in my whole life, so that's that. I'm not going to be good. Only playing that small amount. Well, like the first time I played was 2014, and then it was about a decade before I played a second time and the third time.
okay?
And yeah, it's I'm not sure what your proficiency is, but I would guarantee it's a hell of a lot better than mine.
Okay, what is your high break?
Oh, 15.
Okay,
Red,
that's not
black, red,
bad.
blue. It's pretty bad. I mean, it's double figure, so it's not like horrendous, but I mean, and that was a fluke as well. I was, got lucky with position and that sort of thing. Um,
Okay.
uh, I'd love if I had a bit more time to really put the hours in, because I think it's snooker is a sport you can't really just sort of pick up and start playing to a decent level. You have to sort of put the hours in and really sort of concentrate on what you're doing to really start to build your level. Um, and it's something it is on the bucket list. I'd love to put those hours in and get that done at some point. But it's just the time at the moment, and finding people to play, finding a decent club, and there's all sorts of stuff. And I think you've got to do it quite regularly as well uh, to sort of make it worthwhile. And also, I'm not getting any younger either, so there's there's that
Yeah.
as well.
So it was a few months ago. Michael Day, the writer for Totally Snookered, was on the show, and I think he does a lot of good for snooker. But there is one
I
bad
agree.
thing he's done, and I'm sorry to call him out, but he has kind of ruined this section of the show where I ask non-players about their high break, because no one is going to beat his high break. He was
Oh,
too good.
130s or something like that.
140.
140, yeah.
Yeah. So
That
Michael.
is fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
So
I didn't. I was. I remember I was listening to that and I was surprised. 'Cause I know he is proficient. Well, a very capable pool player. I didn't realise quite how far that extended to snooker actually. So yeah, fair play to him. And yeah, I agree. Michael is fantastic. I love that episode. That man. I've always enjoyed his work when he was doing the Q View and one of his articles and stuff. His output is very very strong, and it's very regular as well. I don't know why, like he can type at speed, and as I was listening to that, I was like, wow, this guy's voice matches his words. It was a really really impressive conversation. He knows. I was just nodding in agreement the whole time because it was hard to argue with his logic, and yeah, that was the first time I'd heard his voice actually. So yeah, credit to that episode. Very enjoyable.
thank you. Well, not thank you to me. Thank you to Michael. Yeah, I agree. He does a lot. I say the only bad thing is he's kind of made that section of the show irrelevant. No one's going to beat
Well, I mean,
140. It's
yeah, like definitely not me. You weren't pinning your hopes there on sort of a little rivalry going on or anything. No,
no.
no. I hope I'm never gonna play him at snooker now. If he offers to if I fancy a game sometime, I'm turning that down straight away. No way.
He's trying to hustle you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that you go to a lot of live events. Do you have any particular favorite venues, or is there a venue you go to a lot?
It's not as such. It tends to be mainly based on location and sort of time in the calendar. Really, those are the two sort of primary factors. Obviously, because the tour is spread far and wide, so it's not really a case of picking and choosing in the sense of what you want to go. It's more about sort of practicality and convenience. But obviously, certain events you kind of you do sort of put more effort into potentially going to, like the Worlds, for example. Obviously, you set aside the time to make sure you can do that and stuff. And essentially, because like I would say the Worlds and the Shootout are probably the two that I wouldn't miss now. I've only done the Shootout for the last couple of years, and they're sort of polar opposites in terms of the style of event. But like those two are the sort of big ones for me at the moment. As strange as that might sound to people that are quite dismissive of the Shootout, I think that that contrast is just fantastic, and it showcases. I know you're not a huge fan of that word, are you? Showcase. Don't worry. I'm not talking about the mixed doubles. It's okay.
Well, we're
So
okay. I'll forgive it this time. But
yeah, I can't remember the point I was making. Now the contrast of the two, the two tournaments is it showcases the depth snooker has in terms of its the different styles it can bring to the table. Pun intended.
and so you've been to a lot of events, and on social media, you're not shy about the fact that you've taken a lot of selfies with snooker players, snooker personalities. How many would you say that you have?
I think I'm closing in on a half century. I think it's. I mean, that's just pros and former pros. If we extend it to sort of referees and other people involved in the sport, it would be quite a bit higher as well. Although I haven't done an official count, but yeah, I think that's one of the things the snooker bubble does really well, because all the players are generally very accessible. In my experience, I say all the players, most of the players. They're always very giving with their time and such, interacting with fans. And I think, I mean, I'm not massively familiar with how that is in other sports, but I can say in snooker, it's a real boon to the fan experience for sure. And it's not like like some people think I have to jump through lots of hoops, or I'm waiting around outside players' houses and things like that. And it's nothing like that. I don't chase them in that way, really. It's if I end up speaking to a player, or I see a player in the foyer or something, have a quick chat with them, get a selfie, and that's it basically. And it's just a nice little memento, nice little sort of souvenir, and the players themselves seem to like it as well. As I think it's it's a bit like I like to think of it as it's the modern, a bit of a more up to date version of sort of autograph sort of collecting in a way.
I would agree.
You know, I still like autographs are cool and people still do that, but I think getting a picture with your favourite players is kind of an updated version of that. Yeah, basically. Have you got any? Did you get any in Brentwood?
I saw Weezer.
Oh, right, okay.
No, I didn't get a picture though. No, but I
Right,
had a quick chat with him after the first session, and I don't want to take all the credit for him for his comeback, but I did say, "Good luck, you can do it." But
so that inspiring words. I mean, I feel like I could conquer the world now.
Yeah, he wasn't in a chatty mood, but yeah, I felt that maybe he owes me a few. He does.
That was after the first session of the final.
That's
yes?
right. Yeah.
So I can understand why he might not have been in the best of chatty mood.
Yeah, he looked pretty. What's the word? Not downtrodden, but
defeated.
What's the word? Like a hurricane had blown through his house. Yeah,
well, he certainly bounced back though. That's
yeah.
You have to say that. Yeah,
it's true. And obviously, in the end, he lost to maybe your ultimate favourite player, or at least one of your favourites, Neil Ross.
Yeah, ultimate favourite. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Were you nervous when the comeback was on?
Yes, of course. I was very nervous. I mean, it wasn't like it didn't reach like sort of crazy levels, but it was when a comeback of that sort of description starts, it's kind of a bit of fun. You're kind of like, oh yeah, maybe he'll come back. It's just Wu Yi's has shown his stuff. He's not under as much pressure now because the game is virtually over. But when it gets to within sort of 3 or 4 frames, it's you start to wonder and such. And it feels almost a cliche saying this because it's the stuff that the commentators do sort of bust out every time. But it is true. And then when he got sort of just one behind Neil, it felt like a very real possibility. And yeah, like it was, but obviously it wasn't like Neil didn't had done anything wrong. He was just he had to be patient and he was wait for his chance, which he did very well. I think he said it was his experience that held him in good stead there, because he'd been under sort of similar situations before, and so he could draw on those. And I think that really sort of showed when he did finally take the chance he was offered, and delivered the goods. I think that was a very, very popular victory across all the snooker scene for all the fans, because I think for a top player not to have won for that length of time, I think people love to see a return to their winning ways. Because it just people love that sort of arc. People love to see the greats bounce back and that sort of thing. It would like any of the top players or former top players that occasionally show glimpses of what they used to do. Everyone's always willing them on to sort of go all the way. Maybe like it's sort of there's like a dreamlike quality to it. So that in the sense that people really, really sort of want it to happen. And yeah, it was really wonderful scenes and great to have Neil back in the top 16, where he obviously belongs.
I compared it to maybe not quite this drastic, but I suppose maybe the biggest example of this is probably in golf. Tiger Woods winning the Masters after having not won a major for what, 8, 9, 10 years, something like that, and then he just comes
Yeah,
into the Masters, and if he's not the greatest golfer of all time, he's easily one of the best. And to see him winning that tournament was fantastic. I wouldn't quite put Neil's victory at the English Open
yeah,
on that level,
yeah,
but it's really nice to see him. And what at 8-2, and even between the sessions, speaking to people in Brentwood, in and around the arena, there wasn't a lot of hope for Wu Yuza. But as the frames, just one by one, you could
yeah,
just sense a little bit more tension, a little bit more. Maybe we might see
yeah.
something special here, and we almost did. Well, we did see something special, I would say. We just didn't get the shock result. That's all. But it
Did you were people? I assume were people really willing Wu to sort of make that comeback? Did you feel in the auditorium like
absolutely,
people wanted to see? Yeah, wanted to see, because obviously I think people were generally very supportive of Neil and wanted to see him lift the trophy. But at the same time, people obviously want, like, the drama and the excitement of a comeback of that magnitude. Um,
I think it was that, and it was also the fact that he'd played really well throughout the week, and to see him lose 9-1, 9-2, that wouldn't
yeah,
have been a fair reflection on his week. So,
yeah,
and obviously, we want to see a close game. We want drama, but it wouldn't have been right for him to be thrashed. So the fact that it
yeah,
was a very respectable scoreline, I think, is just
yeah.
given his
I, th-
performances
I,
of the
I think
week.
I think he'll. Yeah, it's nice that he'll walk away from that with probably more positive memories than negative. I think, due to like those circumstances, and especially also obviously because obviously in Saudi with what happened against Judd,
Yeah,
it was almost a kind of a reversal in some ways, though it didn't quite complete it against Neil. Um, but like, yeah, really the last month has been something quite special for him, and I'm sure it won't be the last we see of him this season at the
no,
business end for sure.
no. I think there's a few youngsters who are coming through, and they look really, really good. CJW is another one. I think
Mm.
I wouldn't be surprised if he wins a tournament this season. And I'm going to
Mm.
look out for him in the UK, actually. I think over a slightly longer format, he might be one to
Yeah.
watch. So I'm going to
Mm.
keep an eye. I don't want to say he's a dark horse because. Actually, do you know what? I might say he's a dark horse because he's not really one of the real favourites.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
if he.
It feels like he picked on more this season than last season. It's like he
Yeah.
had a sort of after his World Championship heroics, he sort of not really fell off the radar, but veered in that sort of direction to a certain extent. Whereas we're still in the sort of the opening. It feels like we're still in the opening segments of this season, and he's really made an impact so far. So yeah, very exciting to see. And yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think he does seem sort of like a big occasion player. Was it semis he got to in Saudi,
Yeah.
so he obviously likes a major.
Yeah.
Um, controversial as that may be to say.
We'll come on to that. So you were at the British Open.
Yes.
Mark Selby won it. Again, another player who hadn't, last season wasn't his best season, but now he's come
Yep.
back. I predicted only a few weeks ago, I was speaking with Dave Hendon on the Snooker Scene podcast, and I said, I think Mark Selby will win a tournament this season. And only a few weeks later, it happened. I'm not going to say I'm Nostradamus, we'll say. But
Yeah.
I think the way Mark is speaking, he seems really positive. After he lost to Joe O'Connor in Sheffield, he seemed kind of downbeat,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was not nice to see. But the way he's been behaving, the way he's been playing, most importantly,
Yeah.
I've got high
I think
hopes for
yeah.
him this season.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's particularly interesting because I think it was during the Tour Championship last season. It might have even been around on the same day. It was very, very close together, but both him and John Higgins were basically talking about retirement and hanging up their cues. And with Mark, it didn't. With Higgins, it felt more of a possibility. With Mark, it seemed like it was uh, just sort of, it's just, his emotions were high after losing the match, that sort of thing. So for them both to face off in a final sort of that soon after that is just a testament to how quickly things can change and form can change, and it's really really good to see. And that's a popular final with people because I think both Higgins and Selby. Again, it's like what I said with Neil. People love to see the greats return to sort of former glories and stuff. So it's a very popular one with the fans for sure. And I think I think with Selby, it's like not many players have an aura about them. Ronnie obviously does. I think Judd does a little bit now. Selby definitely did during his era of sort of dominance, if you like. That has faded a bit, but you still feel it a little bit. Like even when his chips are down, it's hard to bet against the Jester because you just get the sense that he will find a way to get over the line, and it's so maybe I'm stuck in the past a bit thinking that, but that it's like it's still hard to shake even when he's not winning tournaments. um you can never write him off. He's just sort of he's just got that quality about him. And I was watching the David Gilbert match with Mark Selby, and David Gilbert came back very strongly in that game, considering how he barely potted a ball for some time at the start of that match. And when went the distance as Selby's matches so frequently do. And Selby finished him off in sort of in fine style, and never really sort of looked back so much in that tournament. And great to see from Mark, because I think he used to get quite a bit of stick for his style of play, but I think you don't tend to hear that so much these days. And I think Mark is generally one of the more popular players on tour for sure. Which is, considering the amount of world titles he's won, people sometimes, I'm more of an underdog guy. Myself, I tend to root for underdogs, and I think a lot of people sort of do the same naturally. But I always do like to see Mark do well. I think that's he's just due to his personality and the journey he's gone through in his life. I think it's very endearing for people to see him win, and people like to see sort of people overcome hardship
Yeah.
and achieve great things.
No, I agree. The fact that and I think he is relatable. He's been pretty open about his experiences in the past, his recent experiences, his struggles with mental health. But I think he's a relatable guy. I think he's a great ambassador for snooker. I've said it many times, and I will continue to say it until he proves otherwise. And I can't see that happening anytime soon. He's a great player. And there is a bit of a misconception, I think, amongst casual fans, or more casual fans, about Mark Selby, is that he's just a defensive player. He's a grinder. No.
Yeah, no,
He can score like anyone.
he's he's in the top 10 century makers of all time, isn't he, I think.
The man can pot a ball.
Yeah, like hoovers them up around the black spot like quite quickly as well. Actually, it kind of I do get the sense with certain players, it does feel like if you get a reputation in a certain way, like relatively early on in your career, that can stick. And I think that's what's happened with Mark Selby to a certain extent. Like he used to, definitely, he would make the and he still does to a certain extent, but it felt more prevalent, sort of maybe like a decade ago or such. But he would grind frames out, balls would go awkward, that sort of thing, and he would win under those circumstances. But that so it's the sort of the torturer, the grinder reputation. There was sort of merit to that, and that's not a bad thing at all. I think that's a great quality to have. But he can absolutely score with the best of them, as you said. But even when he does that, people still bring up like, Slowby and all of that stuff.
Yeah, Midnight Selby is what Ronnie called him, and I thought it was disgraceful.
I know, you're not a fan of that. I actually quite like that, just because it sounds quite cool. And I don't think playing like outlasting your opponent in the late hours is a bad thing. I love the contrast of styles. Like Ronnie versus Selby is actually my favourite matchup in snooker, I would have to say, because there is spice to that, and it's reflected in both the sort of the clash of personalities and the clash of styles on the bays, and I think it just makes a magnificent viewing.
You mentioned about players being labelled quite early in their career. I
Mm.
would say Judd Trump has been labelled, but in the opposite way. Judd Trump
Mm.
is seen as the
Yeah,
flash young player who can pop balls from anywhere, and he's quick, he's attacking, he's this, he's that. But I would say that Judd Trump, the reason he has become more successful over the last 5 or 6 years,
mm.
is that his tactical play, his safety play especially, it is absolutely fantastic, and he knows
Yeah,
how to, not just how to play, but how to, the tactics of getting through a match.
yeah,
That for me is, but people seem to ignore that. They just, oh, well, Judd's an amazingly talented player. Of
yeah,
course he is, but you need to know how to apply that, and Judd has learned how to do this, and that Judd doesn't get this criticism, and not that he should be criticised for it, but it's a bit of a double standard amongst some
yeah.
snooker fans, I think.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree
Good at
with
that.
that. I've not considered that reversal, but it makes absolute sense, and yeah, it's very interesting to think about it. And yeah, I think it's just it is one of those things you can get, like things stick. Um, it's not exclusive to snooker. I guess it just that applies to things anybody learns about any person, I suppose. Um, Certain, especially if there's obviously like where with Selby there was sort of the moments in big matches against Ronnie and stuff that stick in people's minds, so it always comes to the forefront of their brain whenever they think about him, basically. So I guess that's and it is similar thing with Judd when he first sort of came on the tour in a big way, flashy and all of that sort of stuff. And I suppose it just sticks in people's minds. But he absolutely uh, deserves credit for sort of transforming his game in that way, because it's absolutely responsible in at least some part for his sort of incredible sort of streak of victories of late.
I agree. Yeah, without, it's like I suppose it's like football teams who just go all out attack. You don't win championships by going all
Mm.
out attack. Yeah, sometimes you have to be smart. And Judd, I think, has learned how to apply tactics to his skill. And that, for me, I think he's the most complete all round player in snooker at the moment,
Mm.
even more than
Yeah.
Neil, even Ronnie O'Sullivan. I would say Judd
Mm.
Trump is a complete on table player right now, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to argue against that, and I think the statistics of recent seasons back that up as well.
Mm. So, did you see Judd when you were at the Centaur?
Yeah, I saw 4 matches with Judd because I was waiting for him to make that 1,000th century, and he did it in the fourth one. He was on 999 all week, and it took all 4 matches that that I was there watching Judd for him to do that. So he left it late, but yeah, very nice to see that incredible milestone. Because I've seen big moments in snooker, historic moments, all of that sort of thing. But I've never seen a player make 1,000 centuries before, because it doesn't happen very often. So
Yep.
to see that, although I say it doesn't happen, it happened like last week the week before as well.
Happens
But
every week now.
yeah, um, but yeah, not seen that. I'd love to see Neil reach 1,000 as well. That way I can, I've seen half the players that have reached 1,000 make them. So I'm hoping that's something I'm hoping to. I may plan a certain amount of the rest of the season around how close Neil gets to that 1,000 mark. It would be nice if he did it at the Worlds. I think that is a possibility, depending on how the rest of his season pans out.
Have you got tickets for the Crucible this season?
No, actually, this is a bit of a misconception. Actually, like a lot of people do seem to think that you need to get your tickets like far in advance, and that obviously that helps, and it's not a bad thing. And a lot of it obviously depends on your personal circumstances and such. But I always play it by ear closer to the time. and that's always worked out sort of pretty well for me.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, nothing as of yet. I always do Judgment Day or Judgment Days, as it really should be. I think that is incredible value, and that's like pure snooker. That means a lot. Like, it's different. It's special in a different way to the Crucible because the Crucible, the players there have already they've kind of made their mark in the sport already. Whereas, if you're in danger of falling off the tour and that sort of thing, this is like life is at stake basically, and that really brings the drama, and it's a brutal school, but it's always a fabulous experience to watch. Yeah, it's like I think the best example of that would be the Mark Davis Joe Perry match from a couple of seasons ago where Joe knocked Mark off the tour, but then I think it was one of the like the crowd would just, I mean, the tension in that room at that time was off the charts. And Mark actually ended up coming back on the tour because the spots became available due to other reasons. So the drama was kind of retroactively degraded in that regard. But in terms of the sheer it's not spectacle, but because it's more intimate. It's like it's raw. It's raw snooker that means so much, and um, I think that is encapsulated so well in Judgment Day. It's like the it's like raw snooker before the grand finale, if you like. And I think that's an event that sort of more fans should experience because it's special in a very different way to the rest of the World Championship, but still extremely special nonetheless.
And the venue for Judgment Day days.
Oh, it's
What do
the
you
English Institute of Sport. It's
how do you rate that as a venue?
I mean, it's not really a venue in this. I mean, yeah, when you talk about venues, you've got to consider like qualifiers. You're obviously going to be a bit more. You're not expecting sort of lavish sort of hospitality and that sort of thing. It's essentially a leisure centre. So it's perfectly suitable. No complaints. I don't have a huge amount of complaints for most of the tournaments actually. Like, but I would be more forgiving of qualifiers in general because it's not the tournament proper, so it's more of a sort of means to an end. But yeah, more than serviceable in my opinion.
Yeah. And well, I suppose you're at the Centaur. There were a few. I suppose I might as well put 2 points in one here. I would ask you your opinion on it, and ask you for your opinion on Mark Allen. Mark Allen's on the conditions. What would you say?
Well, I mean, I think it was essentially the weather played a huge part in this. As we it was absolutely ghastly, and weather last week. I experienced that firsthand. Let me tell you. And that was actually news. I didn't realise that amount of rain would actually have that sort of effect on the table. That was something I learned, and also like some of the crowd numbers affected as well, and that was blew my mind a little bit. But yeah, like I think it's perfectly fair for Mark to sort of raise those comments. I know I didn't see the actual because I was there. I didn't actually get a chance to see like his interview with Rob Walker, where he raised those concerns. By all accounts, he was quite animated, shall we say?
He didn't hold back.
I can imagine how it went down. But I think he's fair to raise the points. I know he did apologise for it after the fact, but I think perfectly fair to make that known. I do think that the table fitters do like a really fabulous job. Like I know, we hear stories about them working long into the night to get tables ready the following day after a late night finish and that sort of thing. There's no doubts in my mind that like all the stops aren't like are being pulled to get the conditions as best as they possibly can be. It's just one of those things. I think it's not always going to be perfect. And from Mark Allen's point of view, or any player that complains about the conditions, I can understand the frustration because it's snooker's a game that's so much of it is about control, and this is something that is out of your control
Yeah,
ultimately,
yeah,
and it's so frustrating. I totally feel that. Um, so I suppose it's you talk about players being mentally strong and that sort of thing. I, s- I think perhaps a few of them could perhaps maybe learn to be mentally stronger with regards to coping with sort of various conditions. But that's kind of um, it's not. They shouldn't have to, but I don't really see much other solution because uh, I don't think there's much else that can really be done. I know Judd complained as well mid-match, actually, and it was surprising to see. I was surprised that they actually, they looked into that whilst that game was still going on, um, which was quite, it was great to see that sort of taken seriously at the time, rather than it sort of being brushed aside temporarily. Pun intended there. Um, but like, like Judd doing that. I mean, it didn't. Nothing concrete was done at the time. So it's a strange one. I think I think so, I can't remember which podcast it was on. I heard someone raise raise the point that it's a case for you're making a mistake on the snooker table, and you want to justify it. You want to justify that error, being
yeah.
like, well, it's not me, it's the table. So it's a way of sort of expressing that, I suppose, and the extent of how awful you feel the conditions are, sort of uh, it just sort of amplifies your response in terms of your complaints regarding that. So it would be nice. I suppose the other frustration is that it's more like because we always hear it always seems to be the top players complaining about it more than the guys lower down the rankings. And I think in some ways it is a leveler because if the standard is dragged, if the table conditions mean the standard is dragged so far down, and both players are slugging it out, that can potentially um, suit the lower ranked players or certain players with certain styles more, and so it's also frustrating in that regard.
Yeah, it could be an equaliser. I suppose the other big talking point. Well, there was Ronnie O'Sullivan pulled out. It would appear that maybe it's been reported that he has personal issues. Okay, it's up to him to do what he does.
Yeah,
But Kyron Wilson had a moan as well.
Kyran
The
Wilson, yeah.
Kyron
Um,
Wilson. What do you think about this?
I think, yeah, I think there were two aspects to that because originally it was but yeah. There's 2 points to consider. Is the first one is with regards to who is playing on the main table and that sort of thing, and who is relegated to other tables. And the second point is with regards to the. Actually, I'll cover the first point first. I think like personally, well, listen, I see people complaining about this all the time, and it's one of those issues that you're never going to solve because everybody has a different opinion with regards to how they think things should be. Like some people, it's like, yep, the world number one should always be on the TV table. Defending champion should always be on the TV table. The world champion should always be on the TV table. The local favourite should always be on the TV table. The most popular player should always be on the TV table. Ronnie O'Sullivan should always be on the TV table. It never ends, right?
No one can win. Yeah,
Um, yeah, exactly. And like ultimately, snooker is it's a business. To make money, that's what the tour is there for. It's the entertainment business essentially, and I do believe that uh, right, sort of rightly or wrongly, like like the broadcasters will obviously have it's that they're the ones that will get the final say. Really, I think with regards to who goes on the TV table, and that's not always going to please everyone, like players and fans. And whilst you can, like at the same time, you can argue like, well, you could from a business point of view, it's also good to promote fresh faces, different names, that sort of thing. So there is that angle to it as well. But I understand Kyron's frustration, like absolutely. Um, if I were in his shoes, I would probably, I would be reacting similarly, at least internally. Um, but I would also say, like, it's, there's nothing you can really, you can't really change anything there. It's not up to, there's no, it would be nice if there was a system in place where it was like, okay, this is how we organize the tables and how we decide who plays on which, but that's just not the way it works due to the nature of the business side of the sport, basically. Um, so there's that, and he did actually, he got a lot of sort of, response to that, some positive, some negative. And then I think he did a radio interview where he sort of reiterated his position and said the issue is that um, the snooker authorities aren't being entirely honest and transparent with him regarding his placement on the tables, and what they're doing in terms of promoting him and that sort of thing. And I think that is absolutely fair to say. If the WST are behaving in that way with the current world champion, I mean, that is not a good look. And you just have to, like, wonder if they're, you know, how are they treating the players lower down the rankings if their world champion is feeling that way. So absolutely fair in that regard. I would say because nothing. It's frustrating. Like, I think Kyron is another of those players that has been lumbered with this sort of boring sort of tag, which I don't agree with. I love watching. In fact, I'm wearing a Kyron Wilson T-shirt right
nice.
now. Warrior, yeah, there we
I
go.
see.
So yeah, I love watching Kyron personally. I think he does have. I think he has a lot of personality. I don't know where that's come from. I think a lot of it is just the come from the rivalry people try to sort of drum up between him and Judd at some point, which does exist actually to a certain extent. But it's like, to say the man has zero personality and a appeal, as some people do, it's just nonsense, really.
It's false. Yeah,
In my opinion, yeah. So if I were Kyron, I would use this to motivate me to, get to the end of get to the business end of tournaments where they're forced to put him on. Like, use that sort of frustration, to try and sort of channel it in that way. But it's interesting because I didn't find out about that until that's an interesting thing with going to the snooker. You don't often hear these stories until after the fact. I suppose it depends how much you check into the news and such whilst you're there. But yeah, when you're at events, it's often sort of, it's the pure snooker. Whereas when you're watching at home, you have all these other things going on with regards to sort of what's happening. There's news and dramas and all sorts of things. Whereas a good thing about being there at the venue is it's all the talking is done on the table, if you like.
Well, we actually got an email about this, and we'll come into the emails after, but I'll read this one out now. It's from Alex Duran. It's, greetings, Dan. I thought I would chime in on the Kyron Wilson situation. I, for one, agree with Kyron. He is the world champion, and he should be the public face of snooker. I know you believe, as in me, move on from the Ronnie-centric era, and in some ways I agree. Relegating the reigning world champ to the outside table is not the way forward, especially when Ronnie O'Sullivan is not even in the event. There is no excuse for it. We need to pass the baton to younger guys as the face of snooker, and even a few months into the season, Kyron is in danger of becoming just another player. What is your take on this? Cheers, Alex. I agree. I think Kyron does have a reason to moan. I think the precedent was set last season with Luca Brissell. I feel that this opportunity to have Luca Brissell from Belgium, from mainland Europe, as the world champion. He's a young guy. How old was he? Late 20s when he became world champion. What a chance to move on to the next generation. Even, Judd Trump, Kyron Wilson, even some of the younger Chinese players. These could be the new face of snooker. We can move on from the class of 92 because we're going to have to do it eventually.
Yeah.
The Luca Brissell opportunity was, I'm not even going to say blown. They didn't even try to do anything with it. It seems like, okay, well, he's the champion. Great. Shall we just business as usual? Yep. Okay. And there was nothing to, for example, I was living in Seattle at the time. He did an exhibition at, I think it was Ox Billiards. I didn't find out about it until afterwards. and I'm a big snooker fan. Why didn't I know
Mm.
about this?
Yeah,
It's, this is the world snooker champion in my
yeah.
hometown, a town which doesn't really have a massive snooker following, but I should know about this. And I just felt the opportunity was missed. And I don't want to say we're at that stage with Kyron, but there is a chance because, okay, he won a big event already this season, fantastic, and he played really well. But he's not the face of snooker right now. And
It's
he's earned the right to at
mm,
least compete to be the face of
yeah.
snooker. And I don't think he's
It,
getting a fair shot.
it's a strange one, especially when you consider his recent victory in Xi'an as well.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's not like he's sort of fizzling as world champion, and he's still performing to a very high level. And yes, I have to agree with you about Luca. It's a strange one, that, especially when you consider how marketable Luca is in terms of his style of play and such. And as the first sort of the first champion from mainland Europe, it is surprising that not a lot sort of seemed to happen in terms of pressing on from that. I can only assume there are some logistical uh, reasons for such things not happening, and it's not always in the control of those in power, and there are clashes and that sort of thing. I'm sure there are things going on that we're not privy to. I always like to keep that in mind because I know that sometimes people sort of make sort of huge complaints and such, and there's always things going on behind the scenes that we're not always aware of, that sort of explain things to a certain extent. Um, but it's sort of, yeah, from the sort of outside perspective, it's very, very unusual. Um, yeah, definitely an odd one, and I do hope, I'd love for Kyron to keep winning and sort of force the hand, so to speak, because I think he's a great guy, and like a good person and a good role model for the sport.
I agree. Yeah.
And
For
I think
kids, especially. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see him defend his world championship title, actually.
But he can't
And
because there's a curse on the Crucible.
but
So he
well,
can't.
this is the thing. I think he's got a good shout, though. You think it's impossible? I think
I wouldn't say
there's
it's impossible, but
there was more. Yeah,
snooker gods will say no. I think he
yeah.
has a good shout. Yeah.
I mean, it would be very interesting if he ended up with one more world title than Judd. That would certainly throw the cat amongst the pigeons. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, enticing stuff. Yeah.
And I would say also it would be, we've had some fantastic players, some legendary players play and win at the Crucible. If we had to name, even 10 years ago, we would say, who is the player who will break the Crucible curse? You would say Ronnie, well, we wouldn't say Ronnie actually because he'd already won, but Judd Trump,
Yeah.
maybe someone like Luca Brazil. A,
Hmm.
a maverick player, we'll say.
I think like Tywin would because I don't think many people tipped Luca to win it again,
No,
even at the time actually,
I
like
wouldn't.
of
Yeah, I
winning.
would agree.
I think Tywin has had that. He does have that Crucible pedigree even before he won it. So I think the chance. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think the chances are stronger than it's been in recent years actually.
Hmm.
And the way he's pressed on at the start of this season shows that the work is still being put in.
Yeah,
So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do. And credit to Taylor Wilson for that as well, because I see the uh like the notes on the boards for their practice sessions and that sort of thing, and it's yeah, really obvious they're really putting in the hours in terms of uh making things happen for him, and they're reaping the rewards from that. So yeah, full credit to them.
I would say in terms of pure technical ability, Kyron, I would say for sitting on my sofa, I would say Kyron is probably not the most technically gifted player, but I think mentality is a massive part of the sport, especially snooker. And
It, it,
but
it's
that
funny
doesn't
because
mean so.
it's just funny because I think it was after Gian. It was at some point in the tournament he gave an interview where he said he was really frustrated with people saying that, because as a youngster he was sort of making all sorts of waves and being sort of
Yep.
technically very 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 strong. So
That's
it's
what.
frustrating for
Yeah.
him to sort of have that label.
Yeah, and I would agree.
Yeah.
I'm probably guilty of it myself. I mean, he's 1,000 times the player I'll ever be, but it's it's the narrative that we're given, and
Mm.
I'm as
Yeah.
guilty as anyone as swallowing that. Obviously, he's a phenomenal player, but
Mm.
his mentality, you need mentality, you need
Yeah.
that inner strength to compete,
Yeah.
and he absolutely has it. And I think that is also why he's a great role model for kids.
Yeah.
He doesn't give up. He,
Yeah.
even if he is discouraged, he doesn't give
Mm.
up, and that's
Yeah.
really important as a life lesson. So
Yeah. Very
yeah,
very similar to Mark Selby in that regard, I would say. Yeah.
yeah. I've made a list of a few players who I think are, well, obviously Judd Trump is in great form, but a few players who maybe recently haven't been in such good form,
Mm.
maybe are showing signs of resurgence. So Neil Robertson, now Mark Selby, they've both won tournaments over the
Yeah.
last week or two. I think Mark Allen, he started the season really slowly, but he had a good run in Cheltenham. Is there anyone else who you think could be on the way up or is looking good?
I think on the way, like Julian Boyko, he's not a professional, but I was very impressed with him in his opening match against Steve. I know we had a few sort of bigger names get knocked out early in the tournament, but yeah, he conducted himself well, and I think if you weren't aware, you would assume he was a big player like on the professional scene. So I'm sure he will break through at some point and yeah, do very good things because he is a very very exciting prospect.
And I've made a list of a few players who have had pretty poor starts to the season, we're going to say. So I actually included Ali Carter in here. I know he won the Championship League, but since then he's not really done much.
So it's like the
Uh,
complete opposite to having a poor start to the season. Really, 'cause he won the opening event.
he won the opening event, but he's been poor since. Phil, maybe we'll leave him off the list. Rob Milkins, Tom Ford, surprisingly, who was
Mm.
really consistent last season.
Yeah.
Got to include it. I hate to do it, but Ding Junhui.
Hmm.
Don't think he's
Rob
been.
Milkins, like, like from what I've seen of him, he hasn't seemed the same player. I'm not sure if he's maybe not enjoying it quite so much out there, but he seems to, or maybe he's got other things going on. I don't want to speculate too much, but he's not seemed like the same guy since sort of hitting those heights a couple of years ago. But then at the same time, you've got like guys like Robert Milkins and Tom Ford. They've been around for sort of quite some time, and you know they have moments in the top 16, but it's kind of rarer than not. So in terms of where you think a player should be ranked, it's it's not necessarily a sort of dip in form, more like maybe more like a return to sort of their more uh, their usual level, if you like. And I think this actually plays into the way the ranking system is. You can I suppose that there are actually two sides to that because Tom Ford is generally consistent, so it is a bit more of a shock to see him struggling at the start of this season because he's not usually. It's interesting because he's not. Nobody ever tips him, and he's not really promoted that much at the end of tournaments. But he is a regular semi-finalist, and an excellent break builder as well. So he's quite underrated in terms of sort of media coverage and that sort of thing. Whereas Rob Milkins it's more like he won big, won his trophy. Was it the Welsh Open he won?
He won the Welsh and the Gibraltar.
Gibraltar, yeah. The Welsh was the big one, wasn't it? I
Yeah, that was
think.
the big one. Yeah, he beat Sean Murphy in the
Yeah,
final. It
yeah.
was 9-6,
Um,
9-7, something like that.
it's like you win a trophy and you catapult straight up those rankings,
Mm.
and that's not always sort of sustainable once those points sort of fall off. So um, the dip down sort of happens, and also I think once it can work both ways. Once you've had a taste of that, you can either sort of push on, and it motivates you to do even more successfully in some ways. Whereas with others, I think I guess it's the frustration of trying to recapture those moments, and you know, you're getting annoyed that you can't quite play, or maybe you rest on your laurels a bit because you've achieved sort of what you almost wanted. I suppose it can work in a multitude of ways. It's hard to form is so fickle in snooker. It's hard to speculate exactly where and why. Like you know, it comes from the dips, the highs. It could be due to the amount of hours people practice. You know that, you know, I know that the people play the game to a far later age these days than they used to. But still, as players get older, they will probably find themselves with more commitments in other areas of their lives as well. So that is a factor. I think that might actually be a factor with Ding to a certain extent. I remember at the time, I think it was after he had his. I don't know if he's had any more children, but I think he had his first child, and there did seem to be like he lost a certain amount of that edge, perhaps. So you know, it might not be a factor, but it's a possibility. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
There's a couple of a couple of emails from listeners. But I have two very quick points to ask you about. The Crucible. Should we stay or should we go?
Oh well, there's a bit of a clash in my answer here, because I do think it should stay. Yeah, that's me speaking personally from the heart. I think I would love to see it stay. I have good memories of the Crucible, and I want it to stay there. On the flip side of that, I wouldn't be like absolutely crestfallen to see it go, because I understand the arguments for, you know, growing the sport globally and that sort of thing. Regardless of, you know, where it would move to, I do think, you know, there are issues with it being at the Crucible, like well documented issues. I think if there you know, if there was a way for it to stay, fantastic. Make that work however you need to do it. Like some of the suggestions are ludicrous, like building another floor in the Crucible and that sort of thing, or even building a different venue,
which is not the Crucible.
Well, yeah, it's mad. That's the point. Some people suggest moving it elsewhere in Sheffield or something like that, which I completely disagree with. For me, it's the Crucible that's special. Not, I mean, Sheffield is a lovely city, lovely people, but it's not. That's not the World Championship for me. It is the Crucible is the venue that makes that. As much as the snooker bubble is awesome in Sheffield at that time of year, it is. Is that historic building and everything that evokes, that is the reason myself and so many others would like it to stay there. But I don't, you know, if it did move, so be it. I don't think it will. I know people, in my opinion, people did sort of react quite quickly to sort of the snippets of news over the World Championship, jump into quite extreme conclusions without like a great deal of substance behind them, in my opinion. And I still don't think it will. That's what will happen. I always remember Barry Hearn saying like he wouldn't have it on his, like he doesn't want it on his gravestone or whatever. That he was the one that moved the crown. I mean, I very much believed him at the time. I still think that would be something that he is conscientious of. But otherwise, it's going to be on his gravestone. This is the guy that said he would never let it leave the Crucible on his gravestone. So it's, you know, it could be.
It's no, I wouldn't be massively surprised if it did, but I'm also, as time goes on, I am leaning towards the fact that maybe it might stay. And there is some history, and I agree with you. This idea of building another Crucible next door, but bigger, is completely pointless. That defeats the whole point of it being the Crucible Theatre. It's the venue that's, you know, okay, and I agree. I've been to Sheffield, well, how many times, apart from snooker? Only once, you know, for non-snooker reasons. And yeah, it's always been a very nice place. But yeah, it's not the city that makes it special. It's the theatre. That's what it does. And that whole idea of just duplicating it it's a little bit.
Yeah, like it feels like
it's not right.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to do it properly. Like, don't, you know, it's. I completely agree. it's even on a practical level, it wouldn't work. I don't think that's just the money involved and Sheffield Council going for something like that. It doesn't stack up for me at all. So, like I said, I hope it doesn't move, and I don't think it will. But at the same time, if it does, I will roll with the punches, so to speak. And if it did move, I would make as much of an effort as possible to try and attend that, so that I could get a first-hand experience of exactly sort of what it was like at the new place. Because I can just imagine the media frenzy sort of on social media and all sorts, if that were to happen, and all sorts would be flying out, all sorts of rumours and hearsay and things happening and comparisons and such. I'd have to get see for myself to make any judgments.
Do you have a few minutes to tackle some correspondence with me?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. I have an email from Brian McGovern. Hello, Brian. Brian says, "Hi, Dan." Oh, this is about the Saudi Arabia Masters, by the way. "Hi, Dan. I know it's been a while since you did the review, but some players were critical of the conditions in Brentwood as well. If I recall correctly, there was a post-match interview with Mark Allen saying the conditions were heavy, but he said he would like to have elaborated further, but contractually he couldn't do so. It might explain the propaganda regarding Saudi Arabia. I hope this might explain things, and I hope I'm correct in this. Anyway, on a side note, I'm looking forward to heading to the Northern Ireland Open next month, as it's my first live snooker event to attend in person. Nice. As I'm someone who is visually impaired, it will be interesting to see how things go. Keep up the good work. Best regards, Brian McGovern." Well, I'm sure Brian will have a great time at the Waterfront Arena. I've never been there. I would like to go.
Yeah, same. I've not been to that one, and it's like I've not the only Home Nations event I have been to is the Welsh. And most of those occasions were before it became a Home Nations event as well. But the Northern Ireland one that's the next one on my bucket list in terms of ticking those off for sure. I'm sure Brian will have an excellent time. It's interesting because he says he's visually impaired, and it brings to mind a time I was sat next to a fully blind guy in the audience, and he didn't have a commentary earpiece or anything like that. He was just judging and basing everything on the sounds, and it just shows you how great snooker is in terms of the sort of just the audio, like how much if you could get that that experience from just those sounds. We kind of take it for granted a bit, but the sounds in snooker are they're iconic. The sounds of the cues, the pots, all of that sort of thing, because it's very as a hushed sport, the sounds do stand out, and the fact that you can follow the game purely from sort of the sounds and the referee obviously saying the score and such is marvelous. I really thought that was something quite wonderful.
And well, next week my guest is Colin Matty, WPBSA qualified snooker coach, and he has done work with people with snooker players with visual impairment, and I'm interested to see to learn a little bit more, learn a lot about it, hopefully.
Yeah.
And hopefully he'll be able to give us some good insight into that. I think it's a good question. With Brian's other point, Mark Allen saying he would like to say more, but was told he couldn't, basically.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
It's, I mean, like it's not good, is it? I suppose if you're being contractually, I mean, I can imagine like Mark Allen of all people is not going to be happy about that. So, he's literally having the gaffer tape stuck over his mouth again, isn't he? Yeah, like I don't like the idea of like players being told what they have to say. I mean, it's surprising to hear that because I haven't heard anything else regarding that. I know the commentators weren't told to say. Well, I'm pretty sure Dave Hendon said on one of his latest episodes that there were no such stipulations sort of regarding them. as much as people like to speculate that there were. So I mean, obviously, people were saying that about the certain things the player said that there had to be, and I suppose that does confirm it. But it's yeah, it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's good. Like
Yeah.
obviously, it's just people. It's a manner of control, and it's just getting people to getting the players to sort of falsify things that they falsify how things are happening, basically, and it's yeah, not a good look. And I hope it's remedied in the future somehow. I
Yeah.
wouldn't know how that would happen. I hope I'm not sure what the sort of what the punishment would be for speaking out against such things, but it's 'cause I know obviously there's probably contracts in place with regards to what players can and can't say anyway. But for something like table conditions, that seems almost too. It's far too on the nose, isn't it, with regard to actually like the sport itself. It seems
It's like
yeah
micromanagement almost. It's
exactly, yeah, it's quite it's quite it's it, I'm a little bit lost for words for that, because it's um if they can't speak about that, what else? It's a
what
slippery
else?
slope,
Yeah.
simply. So I do think, yeah, maybe changes should be made there, absolutely.
Another question comes from Michael Waring, the man behind Snooker Hub, and question for the Snooker Hall podcast: to be allowed to enter Q Tour events, you must be in good standing with your national federation. And Michael has posted a link here. I'm not going to read out the whole link because it's 50 characters long. Actually, shall I do that? HTT. No, I'm not going to do that.
Like I say,
He's
Dave Hendon would read that out. That
he
would
probably
you
will,
know.
actually. If Zhao Zintong is still banned from events in mainland China, how can he be said to be in good standing with his national federation, the CBSA? I'm aware that WPBSA said they have been told by the CBSA that their ban only applies to China, but they would have no jurisdiction anywhere else anyway. The point is, the rules for entry to Q Tour would appear to say that he can't enter. It would appear that WPBSA have ignored that rule in order to get him on the Q Tour. Any thoughts? Well, my thought is I'm a little bit confused by the whole situation. If that rule is in place, then I would guess that he shouldn't be playing in Q Tour events. But then I'm thinking, like, he's a really talented player, and out of the players who were banned or suspended, his crime, shall we say, was probably the least serious. He wasn't actually involved in any match fixing or
Hmm.
betting.
Hmm.
Was he? Oh,
Yeah,
he was involved in betting on matches, wasn't he? He wasn't actually involved in any match fixing.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
If I'm
it
not
was. I
mistaken.
can't remember the exact phrasing of it. It was something like concerning. It was concerning match fix. It was something along those lines.
Yeah,
It was low down the sort of the list. Yeah,
yeah. And in terms of,
concerned in match fixing. I think it was concerned in match fixing. Yeah.
but
Like the key word being concerned, it wasn't like guilty of match, but concerned in
yeah,
like the knowledge side of things. Yeah,
and when you compare him to someone like Liang Wenbo, who, if I remember my words correctly, I said he was an unsavoury individual with a grubby history. And I think they were looking for any reason to get rid of Liang Wenbo because of the personal
yeah.
situation that his legal situation outside of that. But good riddance to him anyway. But why would they be so desperate for Zhao Xintong to come back, even if it breaks their own rules?
Mm.
He's obviously really, really talented. He's an amazing player. He won the UK Championship. He won the German Masters. There is something there. He could, and Ronnie O'Sullivan, I believe, pointed him out as like one of the great future players. He could sweep everything in front of him.
Ronnie does that quite a bit, though. I
It's
think
true.
so. Yeah, eventually, something will stick. Yeah.
Well, if you say everything's great, you're going to be right at least once, yeah. Uh, but yeah, why would, if that is the rule, then why would they relax it
It,
just for
yeah.
him?
I am in total support of him coming back. I
So,
agree. I
yeah,
agree with what obviously it's the one of the it's among the lower echelons of uh the crimes, if you like, committed there. Um, but that is the one bugbear I have with regard. I know a lot of people don't want to see him back full stop, regardless of whether they fully understand the situation or that whole scandal. But yes, the one bugbear is that the good standing with your local snooker federation or such, because it does seem that there is a lack of consistency. I mean, why is that even a thing if it's not going to be followed? But it does seem strange, and I do think that I don't think, personally, I don't think talent should come into it as a factor at all. I think because otherwise, that's just dangerous territory for me. Like
Favoritism.
that just, yeah, well, exactly. It should be a blanket rule for everyone, regardless of whether you can pot them off the lampshades. And yeah, it's a strange one. Because how long? I'm not sure quite how long his ban with the CBSA is. Is it an extra year or something like that? It's not much
Something like
longer.
that, yeah. It's like
Yeah,
9
so I'm
months
surprised.
more or something. But it would go
Yeah, I'm surprised that.
beyond Q School next
Yeah,
season. So
yeah. But I'm surprised it would be enough to make them actually sort of contradict their own stipulation like that. But maybe there are other factors at play. I mean, is it with good standing? I mean, it can't really be much sort of. There's not much wiggle room there with regards to.
yeah, it's not
If he's
that
not in good
vague.
standing, they literally sort of, he's literally banned from sort of playing in their events at the moment. So it's yeah, that's it's a strange one for me, and I do hope we receive further clarification on that at some point, because it's yeah, it's kind of worrying if that that level of consistency isn't in place, because you kind of want there to be you don't want there to be one rule for some and another rule for others. It's that simple.
I think the fact that Michael I think shares this view, the fact that he's highlighted this point, you must be in good standing with your national federation. I mean, that's a black or white situation. It's A or B. There's no, well,
Yeah,
I was going to
yeah.
say A or B. It'll be black or white. There's no grey area here. It's yes or no, and you cannot be vague with that. Is he in good standing? Well, yes or no. There is a simple one-word answer to that, and if the answer is no, then it would appear that unless there's something we're missing. But if there is something we're missing, where's the clarification on it?
Yeah, I think there are some situations where there could be wiggle room, but I don't think this is one of them. So yeah, I'd hope we get some sort of resolution on that point.
And I've got a final question from Sean, regular correspondent. I was engaged in a mildly heated pub debate last week about slow snooker players. It's good that people are talking about snooker, I might say. I argued that Peter Ebdon, although not a fast player, was indeed an attacking player. I think that I'll read this verbatim. I think many snooker fans conflate slow with negative and boring. I disagree entirely. Ebdon was a great player who enjoyed a wonderful career, but he is often widely dismissed as a bore. I write this with the feeling that Mark Selby is looking good and could be a contender for titles this season. I hope we can appreciate the player, not the game. Thanks again for the podcast. Sean. I mean, he's right. Peter Ebdon was a great player. He might not have been the most exciting to watch, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean he was a negative player.
I mean, yes, I mean, sort of slowness is a thing, but it's not always a bad thing. Like, I don't even think it's a bad thing most of the time. One of my earliest memories is watching that famous, as in snooker memories, is watching that famous battle between Ronnie and Ebdon. Was it 2004 or 2005, the world championship? The infamous 5-minute break of 12 or whatever.
Yeah,
Whatever it
Ronnie
was.
made a maximum in the same time as Peter Ebdon
Yeah,
at 12. Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah. And there's a reason that match sticks in my mind. So I think these clashes are that they're great, and it's like different styles of play are fantastic. If everyone played the same, the sport would be much duller.
Yeah.
So the more variation, the better, as far as I'm concerned, and that applies to sort of styles of play, formats. That applies to a bunch of things across the board in terms of snooker. I think variation is good.
I agree completely. And yeah, we can't argue with Peter Ebdon's record. World champion, 2 other finals. He won the UK Championship as well, I believe. Never
Yeah.
really. I'm not sure about his Masters record. I know he never won the Masters, but Peter Ebdon won the British Open as well. I know that.
Mm.
Yeah, he's a great. How many titles did he win? 8, 9, 10, something like that.
Yeah,
10
yeah. You
American
have
titles.
to think to a certain extent. Like his style of play has um, probably affects how people regard him in terms of his legacy to a certain extent. Because, like, speaking frankly, I love Ebdon. I think he's a very uh, he's a great. I mean, people say he's slow and boring, but he's an interesting character. Like,
Yeah.
um, I know he's kind of a sort of a bit out there sometimes in certain regards, in certain ways, but you got to love a bit of vegan power every now and again.
Mm.
Um, so he was quite like boring is not there were many words you could use to describe Peter Ebdon. Boring is not one of them.
I agree.
Um,
I think it's yeah, I think it's a myth that's kind of gained some weight as it goes on. I would
this
say
is
that
it. You
he's.
get
Sorry?
it just goes back to you get labeled with a tag and it sticks. Like it's just one of those things.
Hmm. I remember. I'm going to say it. This is controversial. This is controversial, and some people are going to be. Well, some people won't agree with me. Let's just say that. But I think Peter Ebdon possibly pulled off maybe the greatest single shot in snooker history. That pink against Matthew Stevens. I think it was in the quarterfinals or the semi-finals of the World Championship. And what was the score? He was like 16-14 down or something like that in the first to 17, and he needed to pot it. If he missed the pink, I think he needed snookers because there were no more reds or something.
Mm.
But he had the guts and the skill to pull it off. He goes, he
Yeah.
wins, and I think that was the year he went on to win against
Hmm.
Hendry in the final.
Am I right in thinking, was it a decider against Stephen Hendry in that final that it went
That
to?
Yeah, that went to
It was
18-17, and he
the
had the
most
guts.
recent one, and that's an underrated stat, isn't it? Like because the bottle required to beat Hendry at that time,
Yep,
and as you say on that pink in the semi, it's like it's pretty incredible when you think about it. But like I mean, you say uh that's controversial. I'd say probably more maybe underrated. I suppose single greatest shot in snooker history is
it's
quite
a
a big
controversial one,
statement.
but I just
Right?
think the
Yeah,
context of it, the skill, it was a difficult
Mm.
shot. It
Yeah,
was not a gimme, but he waited up. He's, oh, should I play safe and just play for snooker? Because if I miss this, I'm in trouble. But no, no, I've got to go for this. Life is for living.
Mm.
And he went for it and he got it. And I think context is massively important when we're looking at,
Mm.
the greatest of all time, the greatest this of all time, the greatest that. But we'll never know if it is the greatest, but it's definitely worth a mention. And
Yeah.
for Peter Ebdon, a supposedly boring player to do that, I thought was, yeah, fair play to him.
Yeah. I suppose greatest shots is one of those. There's no real metric for that as such. There are no statistics to measure it in the same way
Hmm.
you might sort of talk about sort of the greatest player of all time, for example. So a lot of that is going to come down to personal
Yeah,
preference and such. I think there's in terms of greatest, there's not really a universal um, answer for that. So I don't think that's possibly as controversial as you might suspect. Actually, probably underrated, I would say,
yeah.
would be maybe the word. I can't like. I've put it to the test. We'll see how people respond.
Well, we'll see what the comments are like
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Spotify. Yeah, that's a good one. Rob, I want to say a massive, massive, massive thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you about all things snooker, and you're always welcome back on this podcast in the future.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll absolutely come back. Yeah,
Um,
love the Snooker Hall, and I hope this podcast continues to be a big success for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And where can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, Twitter's probably the main one. So at RobJF24, I tweet about snooker sometimes.
Sounds good. Rob, once again,
Yep.
thanks for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Take care.
Thank you for checking out the Snooker Hall podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all of the support the show has received over the past few months. If you could take a moment to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and a 5-star rating on Spotify, it would help more snooker fans find out about this show. The qualifiers for the Northern Ireland Open are now done, but the International Championship qualifiers are also taking place in Sheffield over the coming days before the tour heads over to China for the Wuhan Open. Some standout matches in Wuhan: Neil Robertson versus Jackson Page, and Jack Lazowski versus Julian Boyko. Those should be good matches. The Chinese events usually very good, a lot of fun. As I mentioned earlier with Rob, WPBSA snooker coach Colin Matty will join me on the Snooker Hall podcast next week to talk about his journey in snooker, his coaching career, and a variety of other snooker issues. I'm really, really looking forward to that. In the meantime, let's savour the last remnants of summer. The Snooker Hall podcast will return next week, and until next time, take care.